sometimes controversial, always politically incorrect, and pro-life without exception, without compromise, and without apology. It's the Pro-Life America podcast with your hosts, Sarah Waits and the president of Life Dynamics, Mark Crutcher.
Welcome back to the Pro-Life America podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Sarah Waits, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and Mark's daughter, Sheila Crutcher. Hello, Sheila.
Hello, Sarah. Hello, everyone.
Before we get started, I just want to make a small little note. If you happen to hear some noise in the background, we have a special doggy co-host with us, and he is very obediently sitting in the corner chewing on his bone, but you might hear him, so FYI, that's what's happening. You hear random clattering.
You might hear a little rustling, so that's what
that's his contribution to the episode. And speaking of episodes and podcasts, there is an interesting bit of news that came out that most people may not have heard of, and this is not really abortion related, but I wanted to cover this because I thought this was interesting. There is a website or service called Seeker, which is part of an artificial intelligence company, and Seeker rates online content for quote reliability and political lean. They are now expanding this, and with Seeker and Oxford Road, which is a independent ad company in audio, they have announced the launching of the first ever Civility Score for podcasts. Now, if you want to know what a Civility Score is, it is boasted as a way for basically people who are marketing in podcasts to measure brand suitability for their advertisements, and they use AI to quote objectively measure the nation's top podcasts. They're looking for what they call is a key contributor to societal polarization and aggression. The CEO of Seeker, Pat Kondo, said the Civility Score provides brands with a simple to understand and extraordinarily effective way to protect themselves from high-risk content. Now, on the surface, this may seem like a tool that people who are using podcast ads can find the appropriate podcasts to market in.
Right.
But to me, this whole idea of a civility score smacks of North Korea and the reputation score of your family.
Like in China, the social credit score.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, basically what this is just an excuse to demean podcasts that aren't left-leaning, probably, for these quote woke companies with their ESG scores and their political correctness stuff, just to say, okay, you can advertise on this podcast because it's woke enough, basically.
Your voice is appropriate enough for this.
Right.
And the interesting thing is this comes on the heels of, we talked a few episodes back about AI, and basically misinformation and political agendas were being spread through these AI search bots, right? And on top of that, you've seen in the past really popular, huge podcasts, such as like the Joe Rogan Experience, for example, on Spotify, and people trying to pressure Spotify and other platforms to take off conservative podcasts.
Right.
Now, luckily, unlike YouTube and some of these other social media platforms, podcasts tend to be free speech oriented, and a lot of them have pushed back. Now, some of them have gone along with the woke agenda, but a lot of them are just like, you know what? Podcasts are for communicating and sharing all your beliefs and thoughts.
Which is probably why they're now doing this. And I mean, they're pro-abortion. They're going to censor pro-lifers just like in the past other social media platforms have, like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter has, Instagram. This is just going to be another tool that they're going to use for censorship.
Any technology that comes out, you have to think about the consequences and how it'll be used. I mean, let's look at 3D printing, for example. Has a lot of really good applications to it, but it has been tried to be used for other purposes, for not good things. So when you're introducing stuff like this, as much as we want to say, oh, well, it has all these benefits, well, look at the consequences. Look how it can be abused. Look how it can be manipulated.
Well, and you also have to look at who's releasing this stuff in the first place and who's pushing for this stuff. And this is being released by those people that are, you know, into quote woke politics and talking about being pushed. recently there has been a push for abortion pills.
Yeah.
Well, pro-lifers have been speaking up against abortion pills, not only because it kills babies, but because it harms women. And surprise, surprise, there's a case out of New York where a man was accused of drugging a pregnant woman with abortion pill.
Mifepristone, yeah.
That caused her baby to die. He is facing a second-degree assault charge.
And the victim has filed a restraining order against him.
So, like I said, this guy is from New York, Dia Beshara. And he has since been released, though. And like you said, the victim has filed a restraining order against him. But this whole thing follows after a 15-month investigation. So this has taken 15 months for him to be facing an assault charge.
And I like to point out he's part of a growing list of men who are being charged for secretly drugging women with abortion pills in order to cause miscarriage. Jeffrey Smith, Jen May in February of 21, John Weldon 2014, Mason Herring 2022. And we can expect more cases, I think, in the future, now that the abortion pill can be ordered online and delivered through the mail. Well, you're not going to tell me that that's not going to increase the chances of this thing happening.
Well, and we really honestly don't know the extent.
These are just the people who've been caught.
And again, where's the abortion industry? You know, they say that they care about women, you know, they're so-called women's advocates, but yet they are pushing for a pill that is already being misused and hurting women, and they're not saying anything about it.
They know that abortion coercion and forced abortion is a problem, and they choose not to speak out about it. They choose not really to do much of anything about it. In fact, we have a report called Under the Radar, and if you have not read it, I really recommend you go read it. This report talks about the women who are beaten and killed for refusing to have abortions. Now, this is not including the women who are like this, who, you know, were given drugs. It also doesn't count the women who were badly assaulted, left in nursing homes. These are just the women who have been killed for refusing.
And that's just a small percentage. And again, these women are being sacrificed in order for the abortion lobby to keep on pushing their pro-abortion agenda.
Because it's not about women. Absolutely. If you want to go read that report, it is on the Women Betrayed section of our website. And again, the report is called Under the Radar. So speaking of it not being about women, John Kirby recently was talking about military readiness and how abortion is a crucial part of that, and even goes on to say that helping provide this reproductive health care, as they like to call it, is a foundational sacred obligation of military leaders. I want you guys to hear what he had to say.
Why is the new DoD policy on abortion critical to military readiness?
I'm really glad you asked that question. No, I mean, I really am. 1 in 5 members of the U.S. military are women, 20%. We're an all-volunteer force. Nobody's forcing you to sign up and go. People volunteer to go. You raise your right hand and you say, I'm gonna do this for a few years or even for my life. And it might cost me my life to do it. And when you sign up and you make that contract, you have every right to expect that the organization, in this case the military, is going to take care of you, and they're going to take care of your families. And they're going to make sure that you can serve with dignity and respect, no matter who you are, or who you love, or how you worship or don't. And our policies, whether they're diversity, inclusion, and equity, or whether they're about transgender individuals who qualify physically and mentally to serve, to be able to do it with dignity, or whether it's about female service members, 1 in 5, or female family members being able to count on the kinds of health care and reproductive care specifically that they need to serve. That is a foundational, sacred obligation of military leaders across the river. I've seen it myself, and it matters because it says we're invested in you because you are being willing to invest in us. You're investing your life, your family's livelihood with us. We owe you that back in return. I had a chance a couple of weeks ago to meet with some military spouses here at the White House. Some were active duty members, some were spouses, all were women. And 201, they told me, that abortion laws in this country that are now being passed are absolutely having an effect on their willingness to continue serving in uniform or to encourage or discourage, in this case, their spouses from continuing service. So if you don't think there's going to be a retention and a morale issue, think again, because it's already having that effect. I have a son in the Navy. I think you all know that, and son-in-law too. They're both stationed down in Norfolk on destroyers. And they're proud to keep serving their country in the Navy, but the Navy told them where to go. You go where you're told. That's the way orders work. You go where you're assigned. You don't get to choose. And so what happens if you get assigned to a state like Alabama, which has a pretty restrictive abortion law in place, and you're concerned about your reproductive care? What do? Do you say no and get out? Well, some people may decide to do that. And what does that mean? That means we lose talent, important talent. And we're, again, an all-volunteer force. Recruiting is tough enough as it is with a very strong economy out there. We want to keep the people that we get, and we want to make sure that they can continue to serve. So it can have an extremely significant impact on our recruiting and our retention. Not to mention, it's just the right darn thing to do for people that raise their hand and agree to serve in the military.
I have to say it. This administration is so full of crap. People who believe any of their talking points.
You're at a loss for words.
I have no words. But basically what it sounds like is he just wants babies out of the way so that more women will be more likely to enlist and stay in the military.
I think you're touching on a very interesting point, because he stresses you volunteer, but you're ordered. So you go where you're told to go and you do what you're told to do, regardless of your feelings on it. And if you're in that kind of environment where you're ordered, you go here, you do this. Of course, abortion is something that they support, because how often can abortion be used in order to keep their service members from having to take maternity leave or leave service?
Right. I mean, it's like corporations who, say, we'll provide you money and travel expenses and stuff so you can go travel to a different state to have abortion. Of course, they're going to support that. It's cheaper for them, money and time-wise. And so, of course, this Biden administration is going to support abortion. And let's not beat around the bush. Enrollment numbers have significantly dropped since the Biden administration. They're having a hard time with retention and getting new recruits and stuff. And so they're going to try to push abortion as a positive reason for enrolling.
According to the stuff that I've read, Biden policy actually requires taxpayers to fund travel costs and pay time off for military service members and their families if they're getting an abortion. However, if another service member was going to, say, take time off to go to a funeral of a family member, are they treated the same for this abortion as they would be for any other reason for taking off?
And sometimes they're not even granted leave. They don't care about these women.
Well, they talk about we need our service members to be able to count on health care, right? How often through the years have we heard about struggles, the lack of funding, the lack of doctors? Veterans have been waiting long times to get to see a doctor from the VA. So for them to talk about how much they care about the health care of veterans and their service members, it just, it boggles my mind. Like I say, it's not really about caring. It's about pushing abortion. You may not be able to get some of this other stuff, but here, we'll pay for your abortion.
Right. Oh, yeah.
On Twitter, there was one person, @RedlegY13. She says, as an AD spouse of 29 years, this infuriates me, as we have had to fight for services for our severely nonverbal special needs son, who is now 22 years old. Still can't get good respite in the D.C. area. Oh, and birth control is free at all of our MTFs.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, again, this is just pushing their pro-abortion agenda, and it's easy to see through to me. I don't understand how people can openly say, oh, yes, they care about women.
This is not about caring. This is about basically pushing your service members to get peak amount of hours out of them, in my opinion.
Well, no, it is. And also, think about it this. It's going to be the taxpayers who are paying for these abortions.
Yeah.
They're going to be saying, oh, well, yeah, you need to support these decisions, these women who have abortions, because they're serving you, they're protecting their country, so you should want to pay for their abortions. That's probably going to be the next line that comes out of their mouth.
Well, like I said, current policy now is that taxpayers are paying for travel costs and paid time off for military service members and their family to have abortions. Now, the House Republicans have successfully added an amendment to a defense spending bill, which is called the National Defense Authorization Act, to block that policy.
Right.
Now, whether or not that will go through in the Senate, we have no idea. So right now they're trying to get it so that taxpayers are not paying for that. But yeah, you're going to see in response to that all these people saying, oh, these taxpayers are so heartless. They're not willing to pay for their reproductive health care. No, they don't want to pay for the killing of unborn children.
Right.
They will pay for gynecological visits, all these other things, but do not call the killing of the unborn health care. It is not health care.
It is the complete opposite. And talking about the federal government, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, during a recent CNN interview, wouldn't say whether or not he would sign a federal 6-week abortion ban. He said, I'm pro-life. I will be a pro-life president.
Well, hold on. What does that mean when you're going to be a pro-life president? That's what I would ask.
And he said, and we will support pro-life policies. At the same time, I look at what's going on in the Congress. And, I don't see them, making very much headway. I think the danger from Congress is if we lose the election, they're going to try to nationalize abortion up until the moment of birth. And so he gave the typical politician answer of not directly answering the question.
It's an I will maybe.
And he talked about a bottom-up approach, how it's important for states.
Yeah, he said, look, Congress is probably not the place you want to put your hopes and dreams if you're supporting pro-life. He said, and so I think we're going to really have a strong bottom-up approach. We're going to be working with states and localities to be able to advance the cause of life. Look, I am completely all for understanding the realities in which we are fighting abortion. And I completely agree that our cities, our counties, our states need to be standing up and protecting the unborn child. Absolutely. But to say that we're just going to leave it in the cities and states' hands and not worry about the federal level. You should never stop aiming for the personhood and the protection of the unborn child at the federal level.
Exactly.
You do everything else at the same time, but that is your goal.
Right. And I mean, he has signed the 6-week abortion ban in Florida. But again, that's a state, and he wouldn't answer whether or not he would do a federal abortion ban. What we need, and my dad has always said this, we need to quit asking politicians about how they feel about abortion or if they're pro-life.
Yeah, because if you look at the most extremely pro-abortion politicians out there, they will make statements like, oh, I don't like abortion, or it's a tragedy, or I don't support it. Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so we need to ask them how they feel about the unborn. If you truly believe that the unborn are living human beings, then they have the same right to life as anybody else. And
so if you ask them, it's like, do you believe that you're a human being entitled to the same protections as a 5-year-old, as an 8-year-old? If they say, well...
Yeah, then they're not a pro-life politician.
Conservative politicians who claim to be pro-life will say things that they think that the pro-life community wants to hear in order to get our vote.
Right.
And it's real easy to recite a few talking points and not follow it up with action, right?
Right. Time and time again, Republicans have stabbed us in the back. I mean, it's like my dad, referred to them, the frill-neck Republicans, off of the frill-neck lizard. They talk a lot of talk, and we've got to start holding their feet to the fire.
The conservative politicians will talk a good game, but when it comes to the actual fighting bit, they lack the fire. You can love or hate the Democrat Party, but one thing you got to give them is that they put up a united front and they fight tooth and nail.
They're aggressive. They're way more aggressive.
Absolutely.
Than Republicans.
The Republican Party, they talk very nice, but they don't fight.
They're too worried about being too nice.
And so if you're really wanting to protect the unborn child, you got to fight. Yeah. Plain and simple.
Well, we're not talking about physical
No.
Yeah. Just want to throw that out there.
No
FBI,
brawling in
listening.
the streets. I'm talking about political fighting. You got to be passing the legislation. You got to be encouraging people to pass these bills.
You actually have to have action to back it up.
Yeah. You got to follow up the talk with the walk.
And which is a good segue into this week's From the Mouth of Mark. He would always talk about litmus tests and, politicians. And so we thought that this was a good one for this week.
This was from his book, Siege.
He said, for the pro-life movement, abortion should always be a litmus test. Our political message should be that candidates who are wrong on the slaughter of helpless children cannot be right enough on every other issue to make up for it. If we intend to be more than a paper tiger on the American political landscape, that is the standard we have to demand of our politicians. And he was exactly right. And so for following up for the upcoming elections, presidential elections,
We need to be asking every single candidate what they think about the unborn child and are they entitled to the legal protections.
Exactly. Well, I guess that's all we have for this week. Until next time, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight.
We're here to win.
Because winning is how the killing stops.
Thank you guys. We'll see you next week.